Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Huntingdonshire District Council's Development Management Committee meeting. I'd like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to do so to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside of the building. So moving on to our agenda, are there any apologies?
We have apologies from councillors Dew, Gardner, McAdam and Niche, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item number 1, is to approve the minutes on page 3 to 6 as a correct record of the minutes for the meeting held on the 21st of August. Are we all in agreement that this is a correct record? Thank you. Thank you. And we will move on to item 2, which is members' interests. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on our agenda this evening? There are no members' interests. So we will move on to item number 3, and we'll move on to 3A, which is Hale Weston, which is pages 7 to 22. And our planning officer, Kevin Simpson, will give us a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this application relates to the creation of a field access to land south of Kim Stables, Kimbolton Road, Hale Weston. It's presented at Development Management Committee as the officer recommendation of approval differs from that of the Parish Council. The site is not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings or protected trees within the vicinity. It is within flood zone 3. Permission was granted for the same access at the site in November 2013, but was never implemented, hence this new application. So moving on to the slides, this shows the site and access and indicates there are no heritage constraints. As you can see, the key at the bottom left there, which indicates listed buildings, conservation areas, and so on. And there are none in the vicinity of this application. This slide shows an aerial view of the site with the access from the road highlighted in the yellow outline, as you can see there. This is the location plan, so you can see the site encased in the red line with the access showing. And this is the proposed siting of the access. As you see, it's exactly the same one as 2013. The plan is actually dated at the bottom there, October 2013. This slide shows the tree protection plan and method statement that was referenced in the officer report. So you can see the trees surrounding the application site and the protection measures that had been in place there as per the key on the right-hand side of the screen that you see there. So moving on to the photograph. So this is a view southwest along the B645, showing a general view of the access point, and the chevron sign is visible there. I reference the chevron sign because it is detailed in the officer report that would be relocated as part of a scheme submitted to us and reviewed by the County Council to ensure adequate visibility from the access point. That's just a general wider view of the access point and the general arrangement. Closer view of the access point, and you can see the associated trees and hedgerows surrounding the plot there. A wider view showing the view with the chevron sign I referred to in place, and you can see the level of visibility around that bend there on the B645. and that's a view northwest along the B645 there. And if it helps to pinpoint the location, you can just see the property known as Woodview on the far left at the back of the photograph. So the parish council have been consulted 3 times, and this is detailed as per paragraph 5.3 of the report. They maintain an objection on the grounds of highway safety, the location of the access, surface water flooding, and the use of the land, agricultural heritage of the site. It should be noted there have been no neighbour objections, and this application is purely for access. Therefore, any future use of the land is not a consideration as part of this application, only the access from the highway. Cambridgeshire County Council Highways team have been consulted, and given the passage of time since the application was submitted, they've been consulted again recently and have confirmed on the 24th of August this year that they maintain that they have no objections to the proposal. And I do have a representative of the County Highways team here with me if you have any queries. The LLFA were consulted, but they provided no comments on it because of the scale of the development, other than they recommend an informative note be added regarding watercourse consent in the event that it is approved. HDC's landscapes team have been consulted regarding the works needed to the trees and the hedgerow, and they say there are no objections, subject to a condition to secure the recommendations in the arboricultural report and the tree protection plan that you've just seen before you. So as can be established in section 7.7 to 7.11 of the officer report and the comments from highways, there are no concerns on a highway safety level, and conditions shall be attached to ensure that visibility displays are achieved, including the location of the chevron signs that you've just seen. And whilst it's acknowledged that the site is within flood zone 3, given the relatively minor scale of development and small introduction of hard standing, it's unlikely to result in significantly increased flood risk. The LLFA have advised that the scope of development did not require their formal consultation, and highways have raised no concerns with regard to surface water. A condition will be attached to secure the access construction from the highway, and this will ensure that there are no negative impacts to users of the highway as a result of surface water being directed towards it. Recommendation is therefore to approve with conditions relating to the time limit for implementation, adherence to the approved plans, limitations with regard to installation of gates. Whilst no gates are intended, this just removes permitted development rights to ensure that no gates could be added unless a scheme was submitted to us for approval beforehand to make sure they wouldn't be too close to the highway and thus cause vehicles to queue on the highway to access the site. The access construction specification, the vehicle crossing regarding the watercourse scheme to be submitted, details of visibility displays, and then compliance with the tree protection measures, which are detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have one speaker, which is Councillor Nick Farden from the local parish council. Would you like to come and join us? If you want to go up at the top there. So welcome, and when you're ready, you can press the middle button and it should light up at the top. If you press again.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Nick Farnden. I'm Chairman of Hale Weston Parish Council. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you on this subject this evening. From our perspective, I think this one is fairly straightforward. First of all, it has attracted some quite strong views within Hale Weston. At last month's Parish Council, 18 residents were in attendance when we discussed this application, and 2 spoke against them. And if any of you have experience of Hale Weston Parish Council meetings, that is a very significant attendance from the public. So it's something that's very clearly of concern. I think the fundamentals of our objection are really based upon road safety. I'm sure we're all aware that in recent years there has been 3 fatalities along the B645. The area in which the application sits is subject to a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's also very well known that this is attractive to be used by motorcyclists as a racetrack. And I know speeds of up to 100 miles an hour along that road have been recorded. If it's not exactly on a bend, then the application site is very close to a bend. And very clearly, for all of those reasons, we would recommend that you reject this application. You know, a number of people in our village have been involved in accidents along the 645. It doesn't get any safer. And as far as we're concerned, it's an unnecessary and potentially dangerous application. So really, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any councillors that have any question for our speaker? Councillor Davenport Ray.
Thank you for coming to speak to us tonight. In the paperwork received by your council, there's also a mention of a 2016 planning decision for something that is described as arguably more dangerous and nearer the bend, where the quote you have in your letters that it was not suitable for any intensification of use. Can you describe to us the similarities or the differences between those two spots?
I wasn't on the parish council at that time, so I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for joining us this
Okay.
evening.
Thank you.
So that was our last speaker on this particular application. We'll now move on to questions of clarification for our planning officers. Are there any questions of clarification for our planning officers? Councillor Butler.
Thank you. As we have a member of the safety or highway safety with us, that seems to be the main concern from the local residents. Although I visited the site and thought there were good visibility on either side, can we hear from you what the officers feel about that application?
Okay. Sorry. The applicant has done a speed survey to the design manual for roads and bridges, CA 185, which is the industry standard. You have to do it under certain conditions and take a number of free flowing vehicles. And the result of the survey was 42 miles an hour. And then what happens is then that speed is then interpolated against the visibility requirements to come up with a visibility that is required. And that equates to 120 metres. And the applicant has actually got 145 metres there. So they're actually got 25 metres excess of what they actually require to the southeast in that location. And also, they've actually taken it to an even higher standard because what we call the X distance, the distance that you have to take the visibility back from the curb line, it has to be between 2.4 and 4.5 metres. We usually work on 2.4 metres, but they've actually taken it as 4.5 metres. So they've actually taken it further back than they needed to, which has given an even better visibility. So it's actually over and above what they could actually use anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Can I ask about the turning circle and the amount of space between the road and the gates? So I'm just concerned about what the usage of the field might be. So if it is arable land and say you've got a tractor that's pulling a trailer, is 18 metres before the road from the road to the gate clearance enough for safety for turning?
sorry. Usually say depending on what the access is going to be used for, then the gates should be set back a minimum of the longest vehicle that will use it. So in this circumstances, it will probably be like a 4-wheel drive vehicle plus a horse box or trailer or whatever it's going to be used for. So 10 metres would be health and sufficient.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Have clarification? There are no more questions of clarification. So in that case, we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion for me? Councillor Sanderson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think the questions from Councillor Butler and Councillor Slade were both very useful and clarified the point. For me, I'm very sorry to hear about the accidents by this location. 7.10 of the report, though, and Jo highlighted it in her response from Highways, recommended conditions, and with those, this application is acceptable. And I don't think we could move away from that in the least. Highways have given some clear advice, put down some clear conditions, so I would be happy to propose we approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors that wish to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Butler.
No, only to second the proposal, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute before we go to a vote? Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification from the officers to say, because I didn't think the gates were included in the application. So I just wanted to know if there was I think they're going to put permitted development rights on the gates.
I'll pass that over to Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to get the plan up. If you can get the plan up for me, Julie. Sorry. Just go up for me. So that's the drink joint. Thank you. So yeah, on that plan there, that shows the design of the access. So you could say that line that you could see going across there would be where you would imagine gates being, but the gates, when we refer to the condition, it's to prevent gates being installed under permitted development rights, which could be put much closer to the road. So thus could present a highway safety issue if vehicles were then queuing on there. So ultimately what the condition would mean is they can't install any gates there without coming to us under a scheme which we would then consult the highways team at the county council on before we considered approving it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wished to contribute to the discussion? If not, then we will move on to our approval and our vote. All of those that are in favour of approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So that's unanimous, so that has been approved. So we will move on to item number 3B on our agenda, which is an application in Abbottsley. And I will hand you over to Kevin Simpson, our planning officer, to give us a report.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is an application for land south of Harbins Farm, Harbins Lane in Abbottsley, which is for the demolition of an agricultural barn and the erection of 2 dwellings on the site. I just need to make you aware before I go into the presentation of a late representation in terms of a condition that we would add to any permission, in that prior to the commencement of any works on the site, we would want to secure the demolition of the barn, just to ensure that only 2 dwelling units would be retained on that site moving forward. It is in the description, but it's considered prudent to add that additional condition on there. The application is with Development Management Committee, as the Officer recommendation of approval differs from that of the Parish Council. The application site is a former poultry farm and considered to be within the countryside. It's not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings or protected trees in the immediate vicinity of it, and it is within flood zone 1. The site benefits from prior approval for the change of use to the building that's existing on the site to 2 dwellings, which was refused but then allowed under appeal in 2020. Subsequently, a later application granted permission at Development Management Committee for the conversion of the agricultural barn to do residential units, and that remains extant until June 2025. So the slide you see before you at present shows the application site surrounded with the black hatching there, and you can see the existing agricultural barn, and again the constraints related to the site. So you can see the conservation area to the south in pink and the listed buildings within the vicinity of the village in pink also. Next slide, please. So that's an aerial view showing Harbins Lane and the barn in question that's already got the permission to be converted to 2 dwellings. I've added the plans approved under the 2022 application just so you can see it in context. So that shows the barn with the approval for 2 units, plots 1 and plot 2, and the current siting of it. This next slide shows the proposed elevations of the dwellings, which would have been there under the conversion of the barn, again, which was approved in 2022. And this shows the site plan of which is proposed now. So as you can see, the barn has now gone and is garden area, and the 2 dwellings are brought forward in the plots 1 and plot 2. This just shows the elevations of the barn as it exists at present. And this is the elevations of the proposed dwellings. And you can just see the floor plan and general layout there with the garages to the front there, and the general arrangement with the contouring and the subservient elements as you move forward. This next slide shows the proposed landscaping that would be related to the site. So you can see that the proposed hedgerows, there's electric vehicle charging points provided for each of the plots, indicated by the 2 turquoise dots you can see there, and the general arrangement and layout there, which you can see from the key. So this is a view into the site from Harbins Lane, and you can just see the top of the existing agricultural barn from there. And then that's a view from within the site east onto Harbins Lane. And then a view south, so that shows the dwelling known as 3 Home Farm Close in the middle of the picture there. And a view to the north, and you can just see the top of Harbins Farm visible there. And then a wider view looking north with a clearer image of Harbins Farm there, and the top of the barn that's already got the extant permission on it there. And then again a wider view showing the barn and 3 Home Farm Close there. So the Parish Council have been consulted, and full details of their reasons for refusal are in section 5.1 of the Officer Report, but they broadly relate to the following matters. That the site is outside of the village limits. There's an earlier refusal for the neighbouring site, which again is referenced in the Officer Report and seemed to relate to a householder development as opposed to a development of this nature. And that this has the potential to set a precedent for future development within the countryside. There have been no neighbour objections, and there have been no objections subject to appropriate conditions from any other consultees, including the Highways team, HDC Environmental Health, HDC's Arboricultural Officer, or the Conservation team, or Cambridgeshire County Council Archaeology. Ward Councillor West has made a separate representation advising that he supports the Parish Council's reasons for refusal. But as detailed in section 7.11 of the Officer Report, the extant permission granted in June 2022 is a legal fallback position in terms of that site being appropriate for the provision of 2 residential units, and so is given weight in the determination of this application. Overall, as is detailed in the Officer Report, having regard to the planning history of the site, The development is considered compliant with local and national policy and is recommended for approval with conditions relating to the time limit for implementation, adherence to approved plans, details of external materials to be provided, further details of hard and soft landscaping, details surrounding biodiversity enhancements via a method statement, the removal of certain permitted development rights to secure the development longer term, details on contamination recommended by environmental health, details on levels to ensure that we protect residential amenity, compliance with the arboricultural impact assessment that has been reviewed by the arboricultural officer, and general compliance with water efficiency standards and to provide accessible and adaptable homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have one speaker, which is Mr. Bill Bampton, who is the agent for this particular application. Welcome. And you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. In some ways, I'm not sure it's necessary because I didn't know whether the parish council were going to be here to add more to their objections, and the planning officer has done a very, very thorough and comprehensive report. But I'll just give you a little bit of information about us and our views on it. We are both the designer and developers. We specialise in very eco-friendly houses. All of the properties we build are EPC rating A, and it's somewhere between challenging and impossible to achieve that with the conversion of the extent permission, but totally achievable with what's being proposed. Also, the arisings from the demolition can all be incorporated into the development for hardcore under the roads, parking areas, floor slabs, etc. So it won't be wasted. If the planning officers wouldn't mind putting up the site plan, the first drawing that you showed earlier. I'll carry on while he's doing that. I think there are significant benefits with the proposed development as opposed to the extent one. It's in a far better position on the site, so amenity for any residents will be vastly improved. When the site plan comes up, you'll also see that there are other properties, residential properties, on 2.5 sides of it. So we actually believe it'll sit very nicely in the street scene when viewed in conjunction with the other properties. Regarding the parish council's comments, it might have been helpful from our point of view if we'd used a different description for the site, because it basically says demolition and new building, but it doesn't make it clear that the existing buildings already have an extent permission. And with the planning history of this site being quite involved with several refusals, I can easily see it being interpreted that they're going from no planning to 2 houses, but it already has permission for 2 houses, and the parish council's objections appear to be on principle, not on design. So I'm not sure that they're really objecting on sound grounds. As I mentioned earlier, I think the planning officer has done an excellent job. He's stated all the policies, all the relevant parts, and formed a balanced view that the benefits basically outweigh the detriment. And I hope that the planning committee, after discussing it, find they can agree with him. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Are there any questions of clarification for our speaker this evening? There's one. Councillor Gorson, there's a question for you.
Thank you for speaking. Just one question is, where would you be locating the bins for collection? Is there an area on your plans that you'd expect to, because I note it's unadopted road, and so it's just a matter of where our bin collectors will be going up to.
I wasn't actually involved in the drawing of this, so I can't be specific other than to say that we always allow for a bin store. So there'll be a bin store discreetly positioned on site within the designated distance that people are allowed to wheel it and that refuse are allowed to collect it.
Are there any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for sharing with us this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer, Councillor Goulson.
Still on the same subject of bin storage, I noticed that the waste disposal, no response, but obviously with something like this unadopted road, have we got some sort of agreement or where they'll be bringing it down to? Thank you.
So, working on the basis of what the officer has put on in the report here, I should be clear, I'm presenting this on behalf of another officer this evening. So, I'm working from the report similarly to you. So, I can see that there's been no response from the waste team, as you've noted. I mean, all I can say is having regard to the surrounding properties. So you've got you've got Harbins Farm there, you've got Home Farm close, the dwellings that you saw from the site photographs. There must be some mechanism for waste collection from there. In my experience of operations, when a development comes forward, they will look at when the situation arises, I suppose you would say, and they need to commence waste collections, they will look at suitability of collection. And sometimes they will make the decision that wheeled bins aren't acceptable for a particular site. And for example, they might provide sacks for waste collection, which could then be put at an agreed point on collection day. But that's only from historic experience, not related specifically to this application, I have to be honest.
So is there a need for when we transfer, if a lorry goes down there and causes damage to an unadopted road, do we normally have some agreement that we can actually go on without failure and costs?
Thank you. I mean, I wouldn't like to comment on regarding operations going down a private road and issues like that. All I can come back to is the fact that there is an extant permission there for the two dwellings. So having regard to that as the site history, obviously I understand they've not come back to us on this occasion, but they would still have to collect waste from there from some point and make arrangements to do that because there is that extant permission for the two units there.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Wakeford.
Just on that topic, is there any value or need for, in the event we were minded to approve this, to add some minor delegation to enable that to be double checked, or would that be picked up in the scheme of how you move forward anyway? But if in order to address that, there would be any value for a condition, it would be helpful to hear the option for it.
I will bring in our Chief Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. We can certainly look at that and think about applying a condition about a scheme for the storage of bins on site that will enable that conversation to take place. But just to amplify what Kevin has already identified tonight, that any concerns about damage to private roads can be offset through an indemnity arrangement with the developer. And furthermore, obviously, there are houses beyond the site as well that clearly have bin receptacles to be collected. It is noted that the average carry distance up to 30 metres is acceptable too for homeowners to bring their bins to a collection spot. So given the wider residential arrangement on Harbins Lane, I don't believe that the theme of bins in itself will go to the heart of principle here. But we can look at a condition if members are minded to pursue that.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes. Thank you to you and Julie for asking a conservation officer if they would come and join us tonight. I'm a bit disappointed they weren't able to join us, but that means I need to ask you my questions about conservation, not only on an application you haven't been working on, but not on your expert area. I suppose my questions are around section 7.11. So it's land classified as grade 2 agricultural land, but it's been determined that the loss of this piece of agricultural land would not be significantly harmful. Do I understand correctly that that's the fallback position in this case because of the previous application? And then I suppose because this is in a conservation area, I think there is scope for us to decide whether this design that's in front of us tonight is suitable within the neighborhood of the conservation area. And I find that quite difficult, partly because that definition of that unique conservation area is decades old. I suppose my question is, can you tell us more about that term significantly harmful and how that relates to it being agricultural land, but also it being in the neighborhood of the conservation area?
Thank you. Yes, certainly. So I would say that in reading that section of the officer report, it referenced the fact that it appears to be that the land has been disused for some time, and I think the report that was submitted, I think for the prior approval application that was approved, was that the barn itself has been disused for some time. So again, the extant permission has to be given weight in the determination of this application because they could implement that permission right up until June 2025, and if they commenced work on it beyond that point. So I think that is a very much a fallback position in considering the loss of the agricultural land for that development. In terms of the heritage impacts, as you say, I'm not a heritage expert, but the way the conservation officer describes the harm, you can start off with substantial harm to a designated heritage asset. So that could be the loss of listed building, it could be anything that's severely harmful, and they describe it as a set of steps. So like every one you go down is the harm is lowered. So looking at what they came back with on the comments when they requested, they said because it lay outside of the conservation area and the distance and intervening buildings, the proposal wouldn't be considered harmful to the setting of the conservation area. So again, that's when you're considering views both into and out of the conservation area from the development site. So it really is falling back on that they are the experts in that field, and very much we give weight to their comments, but we also have to give a wider and balanced view on the planning balance of everything that we're taking into consideration regarding an application site. That help? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? There are no more questions. So we'll move on to our discussion. Who would like to start our discussion? Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. I think it just boils down to which application we prefer. Do we prefer having a barn conversion, or do we prefer having two separate dwellings? And I think actually it's an improvement on the extant, is it called? Extant permission. So yeah, I'm happy with it and I'm minded to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Literally, you took the words out of my mouth. To be fair, I think it's we have to remind ourselves that there is permission there. These two dwellings are going to be built, and I think what's in front of us today is far better than what we had previously. The amenity space, it's more private. I think there's more benefits there for the future owners. So I'm quite happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. I'll accept that. Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. I remember this coming in 2022, and there was some concern about how near to the boundary it was. And so this is a much improved position, and the street scene design of them much better than the previous one, which was quite plain. So yeah, I'm minded to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wakeford? No. Is there anyone else that wishes to contribute to the discussion? In that case, we'll... Councillor Mockball, did you actually...
Yeah, I didn't actually put forward a proposal, but I will do now.
Okay.
And can we also add in that condition for the bin scheme that
Okay.
my
Yep.
colleague was talking about earlier.
Okay, so we will take a vote on approval with recommendation for a bin scheme to be provided with that. Yes. Okay. So we're going to be voting on approval with the demolition of the barn beforehand, and secondly, a scheme for provision of bins on site, and that this will be approved by delegated to the Chief Planning Officer.
Yes, I'm happy to amend my proposal to what you just said.
And Councillor Corney, are you happy to second that? Fantastic. Okay, so all those who wish to approve this application.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So that's unanimous. So that has been approved. We will move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is appeal decision. And we will go over to our planning service manager for that report.
Good evening, Chair. Quite just a short report here, just 2 applications at appeal. One was dismissed, the second one was withdrawn because the listed building consent was not required for the development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to the end of our meeting. And thank you very much for contributing, and thank you very much, our planning officers. Okay.